TMA06 is due in on the 15th of September, but you don't have to wait that long. You can submit it early. Obviously I'm not going to be able to mark it before the due date, but when you submitted it you can then concentrate exclusively on the exam. And I do hope to be making some videos about the exam and particular aspects of it. But for TMA06, the question is about competition law and in particular Article 82. Now, we're not covering Article 81 in this TMA, but I would certainly make sure that you're thoroughly familiar with the key concepts in Article 81 as well. But for this TMA, you're asked to do two things. The first is to explain, the second is to critically evaluate. Both are important, but clearly critical evaluation is that higher level of thought which is going to get you the higher marks. So first of all, what are the key concepts that you need to explain? First of all, dominant position. So you're going to need to explain in your own words what the relevant market is. And you're going to be talking about the relevant product market, for example, whether you're talking about a small area of goods or whether you're talking about a whole range of substitute goods. And what has been developed, and this is in practice quite a complex area, and this is where some economists and some lawyers make an awful lot of money now, but you're not expected to go into the detail. You're expected to explain the concepts. So the first thing that you're going to be talking about is demand substitution. What can be substituted? Now, for example, in the United Brands case, which is a very useful case to look at for a number of different issues, the matter in hand was bananas. The Commission was concerned that the United Brands was in a dominant position for the supply of bananas. But United Brands themselves argued, well, there are things that can be substituted for bananas. So the question is, what would people use instead of the subject matter? And that will go some way to answering the question. So are there any other cases which will illustrate wider or narrower definitions of what the relevant product market is? Now, demand is one aspect of it. Another different aspect is that of supply substitution. It may be fine in theory to say, well, yes, there are no restrictions on competition, if in reality it's very difficult to get into the market. So how realistic is it that suppliers can switch production into the relevant products and markets? So having defined the relevant market, you also need to explain the term dominance. Now, in the early years it was all about percentages, but later on the Commission comes to recognise that the key point is whether the undertaking concerned can act independently of its competitors, and this is the key. So some of the things that you'll be bringing out are issues about the market share of the undertaking compared to the other competitors. Let's say in the very early dates, they talked about a certain percentage of the market. So if you had 50% or so of the market, you were in a dominant position. What's been recognised is that if the market is lopsided, you may have 33%, but if all your competitors are really small fish, 1 or 2% each, that can still be a dominant position. The undertaking may have a technological advantage which its competitors can't have, and that may be linked to intellectual property. Also, there are the financial resources that the undertaking in question may have. So the first concept to explain is dominant position. The second is abuse. And now just a word about exam questions. Questions on competition can come in essay form or they can come as problem questions. And sometimes students, under the pressure of exams, can give lots of detail about the dominant position but fail to point out that dominant position on its own isn't sufficient. There has to be an abuse of that dominant position. So if you do get faced with a problem question, don't forget that it's not dominant position alone. It has to be abuse. Explain what that concept is. It's about using that dominant position to rig the market in the undertaking's own favour. And there are examples that you can use, and I strongly urge you to give those examples as illustrations. The third key concept is abuse which may affect trade between member states. Again, not a particularly difficult hurdle to jump over, but a very important one to mention in concepts. Now, when you're doing this, it needs to be in your own words. The skill that a lawyer needs is that ability to explain to his or her client sometimes quite complex ideas in language the client can understand. So it's not enough to get some long-winded quote from some great academic expert. You need to be able to explain in your own words dominant position, abuse. The second thing that's important is, in putting it into your own words, and particularly with the word limits that we have, you need to be succinct. You need to condense the information into something that is more manageable. And of course that's the first key to revision. So, having done that, having explained the key concepts in your own words, give plenty of examples. Again, the manual gives ones that you can use. The second part is critically evaluate. Your question has these comments by Monty. You need to evaluate them. And at the heart of it, this question is about risk. So you need to explain the consequences of falling foul of competition law. But most of all, you need to show how different is the prohibited behaviour from ordinary business behaviour. What Monty seems to be saying is that actually ordinary business behaviour stands that risk of going over the line. So illustrate that. Business is about winning, but it's not about destroying. And so, of course, the Friday afternoon email, well, we've had a great week. What we want to make sure now is that in the coming week we destroy our competition. Now that looks fine on an email between friends after a couple of beers, but it looks to the Commission as if you're trying to destroy your competitors to get rid of competition. Look at abuses. Look at the abuses of dominant position and compare that to behaviour that is regarded as being very competitive. It's normal in business to try and charge the most that the market will stand, and that's quite normal. But when an undertaking is in a dominant position, doing that can be seen as an abuse. Refusal to supply. I mean, it is a free market. People should be able to choose who they deal with. But again, it's an abuse where you have a dominant position and you refuse to either to have as suppliers or for you to supply to those who don't toe the line. Predatory pricing, cutting prices in order to compete. Or is it actually an attempt to make sure that the competition is forced out of the market? So give examples, come to a conclusion. So we're looking for your own comments. There is no right or wrong answer, but make sure that you're using cases and examples and a rational argument to come to that conclusion. Well, thanks, and I look forward to receiving your TMAs fairly shortly.